Welcome to Gestalt IT.
Hi, I'm Omar Sultan, Director of Product Management for Automation at Cisco.
And I'm Tom Hollingsworth, and I am the Network and Security Analyst here at Gestalt IT. And Omar, it's a pleasure to be back at Cisco Live and to be talking to you about some of the awesome technologies that we've been hearing that Cisco's been, developing and kind of coming out with. And we've always been big fans of what Cisco does. What are some of the exciting things that you've been working on with your group?
So one of the things our team has just released is a workflow manager for automation. So we just announced a couple of weeks ago, and we'll be able to talk about it a little more at the session we're recording. And you can always swing by the booth and get more details.
Well, I mean, it's awesome because we've been talking about automation for years now. It feels like it's something that's kind of always been out there on the horizon. And at first there was this, I don't know if there was a hesitance from people. They're like, oh, automation's going to take my job. I'm not going to be able to, do networking stuff anymore. And that kind of faded away as people realized what the power of automation was. But I really don't feel like a lot of people have adopted it the way that we were hoping it was going to be adopted. What are some of the challenges that people are facing with automation?
No, that's a pretty spot on. We see everyone say, yay, automation is great. There's a lot of, no one these days says automation is bad, but still the uptake is not where you would expect. And that's where I spend a lot of my time trying to understand, well, why people don't automate more. One of the things we're trying to tackle with the team is trying to make it more accessible, right? Okay. I mean, a lot of automation tooling is still fairly geeky, whether it's NSO service code or Ansible playbooks or Python scripting or those kinds of things. There's a certain barrier to entry to that. So that's why things like the workflow tool that we created, or some of our other solutions like the CNCR Crosswalk Network Controller, they're about trying to package things we know people want to do and kind of put the easy button on them. So certainly that's one thing, is to make it more accessible to people that aren't necessarily developers or programmers, just kind of everyday folks trying to just get stuff done.
Well, I'm glad you touched on that, Omar, because that's one of those things that I've heard a lot from people when the automation journey first starts out, and people are trying to figure out, well, do I use Puppet? Do I use Ansible? Do I use Python? Do I use this? And the refrain that I hear from people in the community is just shut up and learn something. And I did that. I have a CCIE. I learned networking. I learned how routing protocols work. I don't want to go learn all of these other programming languages and API function calls and things like that. Like I'm old at this point. I want to learn new things. How does Cisco's platform help me do the automation stuff without having to know the nerdy bits underneath?
Well, I think you don't escape. You don't escape the nerdy bits. Back when I got my CCIE, people were still using RIP. So then I had to learn SPF and ISIS and those kinds. So I think you always need to be learning new stuff. But I think it doesn't have to be quite so geeky, right? I mean, I don't have to do one's complement to understand subnet masks anymore because we've evolved the technology. So this is what we try and strive to do, is make it simpler and easier for folks to grasp without having to get totally into the weeds. But I don't think you should be scared of automating or at least understanding how automation works. I think that's a fundamental skill for folks that are comfortable in the CLI or just think of themselves as router jockeys.
And that hesitance kind of exists kind of at the lowest level of the practitioner pyramid, if you want to call that, the people who are kind of doing the daily tasks, the operations teams. Are you seeing any challenges from automation adoption higher up, say, the senior architect's role or even in the executive's role? Do they understand the value of it, or are they still trying to justify the costs associated with creating all of this new tooling to fix what they consider to be, easy to solve problems?
Absolutely. I think each level has their own challenges, right? I mean, at the very top level, they don't care, right? They're looking for the business advantage. How does this help me turn around services faster or lower cost, those kinds of things. I think at the architect level, people want to understand conceptually how does automation work? What are the benefits? They don't necessarily care whether they're using, Puppet or Python or, NSO or whatever to do it. And then at the service chain level, people that kind of own the end-to-end service chains, they care less about what your product does as long as it works, as long as it plugs into the service chain that they're building. Mm-hmm. So, every layer kind of has their concerns. And, if you're trying to advocate within the company, you kind of need to understand the care-abouts for everyone you're talking to, everyone you're trying to enroll, and be able to address them.
Does this conversation change as companies look at what it's going to take to be going to the cloud? Does the cloud enhance the ability of automation to kind of, scale out these workloads, or is the cloud its own set of challenges that need to be solved?
Well, I think the latter is always true.
That is true.
So I think a lot of the cloud providers have their own tooling. So it's another set of tooling where they've tried to address their own challenges around complexity and making things easier to turn up. I think that the trick is always you need to look at the tooling that's out there and figure out how it applies to your environment. I think, kind of looping back, I think the biggest challenge is, even at this point, every customer I see is a snowflake. Because ultimately automation is about, programatizing how they do things. And if you take something simple like, provisioning a layer 2 VPN, very simple, well understood, but you take 3 customers, they can have 3 different approaches because it's, their technical requirements, their people, their processes, all those things. So, I think there's some commonality people can leverage across toolings and communities of interest and those kinds of things, but it's also very one-off. And I think that's sometimes where we run into the challenges where it's like, okay, I can find code to help me automate provisioning with VPN, but I don't know how to go talk to my operations folks or my lines of business, those kinds of things, to get them enrolled in this and show them the value or show them the benefits and those kinds of things.
Well, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that even though we know that the technology is going to be valuable for us, we kind of almost have to turn ourselves into salespeople to evangelize what these changes could do to impact our teams, both positively and help them understand that there's some changes negatively that might happen in the short term that will provide value in the long term.
Yeah, push back a little bit on the salesperson.
Oh, yeah, obviously. Sorry, I didn't want to accuse anybody of being a salesperson.
But I think, I'm going to say, since we have the dyad share set up, I think you need to have empathy and understand the person you're trying to talk to, what do they care about, and how, help connect the dots for automation from that perspective.
Okay, so don't sell it as the automation's going to take your job.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Man, that's where we messed up all those years ago. If we'd have just started off that way, we'd have been fine. What are some of the features in some of your products that kind of help drive this change home a little bit better? What's one thing that if you were, say, looking to adopt the solution, that would be like the lights out feature for you that you're like, I've got to have this now?
I think a lot of it is just, make it pointy clicky, which is, instead of having to look at lines of code or look at configuration or service models or those kinds of things. Something like CNC is great because it's very point and click interface. You can do things without having to necessarily worry about how they're done. And then we have customers that, once they get to that point, then they want to dig deeper and say, hey, you know what? I want to pop the hood and understand how it works because I want to be able to customize it and I feel more comfortable. If you look at our workflow, we actually did the opposite. It's really designed for folks that are more advanced right now, and it doesn't have the pointy clicky because they've told, our larger customers have said, the pointy clicky is nice to get started, but when I have 400 nodes in a workflow, then that becomes cumbersome. I'd rather have APIs and just be able to deal with things programmatically.
So I'm going to put you back in the shoes of a practitioner for a minute.
Okay.
I'm trying to get an automation, thing rolled out in my company, and I'm seeing friction from those people. What's the first thing that I need to do to investigate to help kind of push this along, to help people understand where that real value lies?
I think the first thing is to enroll them in the process. I think too many times people feel like automation is something that's done to them as opposed to being part of that. A lot of times folks in the industry will push automation for OpEx savings, and I think that's the worst thing. A, because it scares people, and B, it's not true. I mean, at the end of the day, automation is an investment which will drive payoff. It'll, faster revenue, more productivity, some of those things. I think if you approach it as, okay, this is going to cut OpEx, cut headcount, whatever, you're going to turn your own team against you, but it's also not setting expectations properly for yourself as well as for your leadership, the folks that are signing off on the projects.
It sounds like you've done a lot of research into these things and you're very knowledgeable in the field. If people out there that are kind of doing their own research want to learn more, where can they go to find out some of that?
Sure. So they can certainly head over to the Cisco website, head over to DevNet. There's a lot of good stuff there on all the different types of automation that Cisco supports, not just my stuff, but Python and Ansible and those kinds of things. There are a lot of good communities out there too, a lot of the net DevOps communities out there doing a lot of great work on kind of building a community of interest and some body of knowledge around how to do some of these basic things.
And I can agree with that because I remember when we first kind of started this journey into automation and software-defined networking, and have seen the trajectory of what has been accomplished with it. And you don't realize how much change has happened until you get right there to the end, and you're like, wow, this is so different than it was when we were doing networking 5-10 years ago. And that is something to me that shows the power of what technology is capable of providing for us, thanks to great folks like you who have a little bit of a vision to see where we need to go.
Cool. Thanks, Tom.
All right. Well, thank you, Omar, and thank you out there for watching along. If you have any other questions or you want to learn more about some of the great strategies that you're seeing here, please make sure you check out some of the sessions that we've recorded at Tech Field Day Extra at Cisco Live US 2023. Also, don't forget to check out Cisco.com and DevNet to get more information, learn some more information about some of these solutions. And make sure you stay tuned in to GestaltIT.com for more content and great interviews like this.